Get to the church blind! Get to the church blind! Go! Now!
I'm Pete Mitchell, and he's Peyton Jones, and you're listening to Hardcore Church Planning, the companion podcast for the Church Planner Podcast and Church Planner Magazine. Each week, we'll bring you interviews from planners who are in the trenches making it happen right now. These active church planners bear it all, share their successes, their failures, and what they'd wish they'd known when they were first starting out. Listen in to discover how God is working in their church plant.
Hey, Church Planner, this is Peyton Jones, and I am here with a special guest today. And here's the deal. We haven't run this for probably about, 5 weeks. I've been kind of quiet about it. I mean, I got a book that just came out. I never talk about this. Didn't make any big deal about this at all. It's called Reaching the Unreached, Becoming Raiders of the Lost Art. And so during that month, I have taken off just to promote and do all that. So some of you guys thought, maybe even though Pete's not on this, I got emails where people were like, are you and Pete still friends? Are you guys okay? Just been super busy with the release of the book. And what's kind of cool today is my guest also has a book that came out recently that she has co-written. And I want to just kind of pick her brain about some of the stuff that she's an expert on. And so here's the deal. My guest today is Christiana Rice, and her book is co-written with a good friend of the podcast, Michael Frost, and it's called Altering Your World. She is also involved in a ministry in San Diego called Thresholds, and we want to hear a little bit about that, maybe a lot about that, and hear, her passion is really impacting neighborhoods and community involvement. And of course, that's just kind of like, the close cousin to church planning. You guys know that the way to reach a city is to serve it. The way to reach an individual is to serve them. The way to reach a neighborhood is to serve it. And so any hay, I made up a word. Can I do that? Any hay. That's like when people invented putting dogs in their purses. You can just make stuff up. It's cool. So anyways, my guest is Christiana Rice. Christiana, welcome to this crazy little thing we call Hardcore Church Planning.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here. Hey.
So, hey, you got this book. And it's called Altering Your World. Tell us.
It's actually called to Alter Your World, just for the those are going to go Google it. Close though.
Thank you for that. We had a crazy wild ride. And it's funny because we talked to Michael a little bit about this book as well. So I should have that down. I have it sitting right here on my desk. So my apologies. Yes, To Alter Your World. And anyways, how did you, we'll talk about the book. How did you hook up with Frosty?
Well, actually, I've known him for a good 10 years, maybe 10 years plus, kind of fuzzy. It started off probably as a lot of us. I read several of his early books, especially The Shaping of Things to Come with Alan Hirsch was a formative book for me personally, as well as some of the work we were doing in church planting and leadership development. So I guess we overlapped at a few conferences over the last 10 years. And then there's a conference called the Inhabit Conference in Seattle, Washington. And that year I was leading and teaching some workshops, but I was also hosting the conference. So I had the opportunity of introducing Michael to the conference. And through that process, we started to sit together. We kind of hit it off. I went to several of his workshops as well. And from there, it was kind of a curious, odd, bizarre question of what would it look like if we kind of experimented and thought about writing together. And the funny thing is, he approached me and he asked me, I'd be interested in writing with you. That is, if you're any good at writing. And I'm like, well, I guess that's up to you. So I sent him some of my stuff, and we both felt like it was so crazy enough to try, and we just kept moving forward. And things, it really felt like just one of those things, an unexpected, paths you start following that you're kind of anticipating it to shut down at some point, and it never did. And it actually started off as a project that I would sort of write stories for a book he was writing, and then it morphed into this really robust co-written effort. Yeah.
That's cool. So you had a lot of the stories on the ground then.
Yeah, I did. And I mean, also, Mike has also traveled and is in deep connection with a lot of people doing some pretty remarkable things in church planning and community development work. So we got to collaborate even on a lot of our stories as well. And but most importantly, I think I got to tell my friends' stories, and stories that are often off the grid and not necessarily told. I think that they're incredibly tangible. I feel they're stories that people can grab onto and say, and yet they're not meant to be prescriptive. So it's not, oh good, okay, I'm going to go see what this church did or this group did, and now we're going to go do the exact same thing. What we try to do is kind of pull out what was the essence and how did these people actually, what was their process and how did they listen to God to know what step to take next? And it's a very contextualized book. So, helping people say, how do we learn from one another and glean wisdom without over, prescribing what it looks like to go plant a church or community, an initiative in your neighborhood.
I think that's really important. It's really funny because one of my deals is, I'm a product of my time and culture, and I read a lot of stuff from the 1800s. And so Ian Bounds' quote comes to mind where he said, men are always looking for methods, but God is looking for men. But my wife would bust my skull over that because she's and women. And, so maybe if we modernize that quote, it'd be, people are always looking for programs, but God is looking for people. And I love the fact that you're like, look, this is not prescriptive. This isn't, hey, this is what we did in this neighborhood, and this is going to fit your context. I love that you guys are sensitive to what God might want to do in your neighborhood. Tell us a little bit of your story of how you got into community development, because obviously when we have a guest on, we kind of check out everything you're involved in. And so I was looking into thresholds and, watch some of the videos and check that stuff out. Tell us a little bit about, what was your journey into this? How did you get involved with these types of ministries?
Yeah, it's interesting. My history, my family lineage, I come from a missionary family. So my grandparents were lifelong missionaries international, as were my parents. And we grew up in a community culture. So I was basically surrounded in a very ecumenical setting by folks who'd, felt this sense of call to move to. I grew up in Tokyo, Japan. So their call was to go and immerse within a culture and participate in what God was doing in that place, and how Jesus was bringing people into this sense of God, which was really countercultural in a very Shinto Buddhist setting. So you had to become someone who knew how to exegete culture, who knew how to listen well, who knew how to allow for lots and lots of mistakes along the way and ask forgiveness and mutual learning. And you had to be in it for the long haul. So then I moved to the US, and I went to Azusa Pacific University and then Fuller Seminary, and began to explore, topics. So my husband was a pastor, and actually we were in Los Angeles, and we were trying really hard. I was leading the kind of outreach, portion of our church. How do we reach the city, do outreach programs, help the poor? We were being obedient to the commission of God to make disciples and to care for the poor and the alien and the widow. And we were trying so hard. And what was really difficult is that we all came from this wide geographical span, and people's limitations, because we really weren't sharing life together, and we had distance against us. And I'm not, obviously, again, I am, by saying this, again, I'm not advocating for a particular methodology, as you stated earlier, or a particular, blueprint for this is the way we should do church. But rather, I think just in my own story, my own convictions, I became curious about what could we do to actually I became curious about spiritual formation. So more so, how is God forming us, and what would it look like if we really came together as a committed community and devoted ourselves to being formed and participating in how God is altering the world, one person, one neighborhood, one street at a time. So this was just my own journey. So we moved to San Diego, urban San Diego, in a specific neighborhood a good 8 years ago now. And so much has happened. I mean, our stories, we treasure our stories, and they're still, I think, being written. But in a lot of ways, I feel like we're just beginning. So we help people, we help churches, we help leaders, we help individuals, we help organizations who are wanting to know, how do we really, on a life on life, authentic kind of being formed spiritually, how do we engage what God is doing uniquely in this place. So that's kind of how my story began, with just a curiosity of what would it look like if the church were more devoted to both community with one another, particularly in a geographical space, and that was out of a posture of both being altered by God in a particular place, as well as understanding that God is, that our presence there, actually we get to participate in the world altering work of God in this, I would almost say, this macro movement of individuals coming together in neighborhoods everywhere. So that's been my passion. And I think that's what kind of has stimulated the book.
So really, in a way, it's kind of joining God on mission and what he's already doing, and it's entering into that slipstream. That's kind of what you guys feel like happening.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And then it's an inspiring thing to say. I mean, I think that's been something that's been a passion, and, just that becomes the motivator for me. And I think for a lot of church planters of, great, we're going to go join God. God's already doing something. God's out ahead of us. How do we enter in? But it's that how question that we're all still asking. And I do find that, weekly, if not daily, the probably number one question that people ask me is, okay, what do I do next? So I'm a coach. I'm a leadership coach. And a lot of times I am coaching church planters, and they can't help but ask, what's the next step I'm supposed to take? What do I do? How do I get, I know what I want to see happen, but how do I do it? So, one of the things
we often, Christiana, what we do is we talk. We're really good at talkers, and modern ministry produces talkers. And you look at the first century, they were doers. And so like yesterday, I was at a meeting, and at the end, because the guys were asking my iPad died. So I really didn't have my notes, which was cool anyways, because I want to get to the Q&A when I'm talking. And the one of the guys there, he sat back, and I was with a buddy. He's like, I know that dude, and I think he's an amazing leader. But the guy sat back and said, I don't have any clue what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And when you get to that kind of vulnerability where leaders are able to say, okay, Christiana, how do I alter my world? Like, I'm doing the thing. I'm going through the motions. I'm running a service, or I've planted this church.
Right.
I launched this thing, but I'm really not impacting anyone around me. Here comes the golden $1 million question that I know you can't wait for me to ask. How do we alter our world?
Oh, is this the one? Is this the one I've been waiting for?
This is the one. This is just, spoiler alert. Here it comes.
Okay, well, let's see. How provocative can I be, to hit it back at you? Well, I actually would say stop trying to alter your world. So stop trying to alter your world, and instead learn what it means to authentically live the life you were meant to live. And I think that's what Jesus invited us into. So this life we were meant to live is a full engagement in all that Jesus showed us and all that we were made to be. So it's this I love what David Benner says is the closer we come to understanding ourselves, the closer we come to God. And the closer we come to understanding God, the closer we come to understanding ourselves. And that is a lifelong process. And I think we'll find that along the way, we will get to be a part of altering the world when we are living our authentic true selves and we are following Jesus into the unknown, which looks completely different. So let me quickly say in our book, we introduced the metaphor of the midwife. So we say, if you can imagine, and this is a very biblical metaphor, in Isaiah, the prophet speaks of God articulating this desire to see rescue, to see newness, to see the new creation come. It says, I'm groaning like a woman in labor, birthing this new world. So if God is birthing the new creation, all around us, within us, in our places, what does it look like for us to attend in the birth? And the midwife of the metaphor allows us to see that we get to attend into birth in something that has never been done before. So every birth is unique and new. What God is doing in your particular place is brand new, fresh and new. And your person, your leadership, your congregation, you actually contribute to something brand new. But the pressure is off. It's God doing the birthing, and we're the ones attending.
That's rad.
And then you'll find you get to be a part of altering the world.
I want to hear some stories where you felt like that, because I literally took an Uber ride the other day, and I have never led an Uber driver to Christ. And I walked in like to the slipstream, like literally it was like an Ethiopian pulling up in a chariot going, hey, exposit Isaiah 53. Easiest evangelistic exchange I've just about ever had. And the guy just wanted to talk about Jesus, and he was Chinese, and he said God had been talking to him. He didn't know what to do with it. And he didn't believe in Christianity because he had met a lot of Christians since he'd been here. But it was amazing. And exactly what you're saying. Like I was grumpy. I didn't even want to talk to the guy. I don't want to talk to anyone because I've been up since 4 a.m, hopped a train to Burbank and taken an Uber. And it was literally like the Lord was like, hey, man, I exactly what you said. Just need you to show up. But I'm here. I'm working in this dude's life and, want you to be a part of it. And I got that blessing. Tell me some stories, because I know you're in San Diego. Tell me some stories about your neighborhood. Where have you encountered God preempting you and saying, hey, I'm here and I want you to be a part of what I'm doing, and don't try so hard. I'm doing all the heavy lifting. Right.
And I would love to. I mean, of course it's always, telling stories, I think is it's the gift we offer each other. And what I love, my favorite is when my neighbors, tell the stories for us. So when we find, I would say I was recently, one of my friends was going through, and neighbors going through an enormous tragedy. And she's here in my backyard, and I could tell, and through the metaphor, God's birthing something in her life. God's doing something in her life. And by the way, she's very spiritual, not a Christian. And she began to describe this chaos, and it was coming at her from every angle. And I just asked her if I could pray for her. And I could feel in my spirit, this almost the spirit saying, like, attend to what I'm doing in her life. So it's not me coming at her saying, okay, great, I need to, she's my project. I'm going to now save her. I'm going to, I have a strategy for what I'm going to tell her so that she can XYZ, say the prayer and come to Jesus. But rather the posture was, oh, whoa, like you described in the Uber, like this almost just revelatory moment. God's doing something in her life. So I asked her if I could pray. And what I did was I prayed, and she's open to prayer as in our context, a very spiritual, urban context.
Yeah.
And
I don't use sinners prayers, by the way. It's funny because we're probably similar on that. To me,
yeah,
I read the New Testament. I'm like, yeah, baptism kind of, we didn't baptize him right then, but he was
well,
asking
right.
all the questions like, man, I want to surrender. Like he was just, I don't know, man. It was weird. It was like the stuff you read about and
Well,
your
right.
parents were a missionary.
Totally.
Amazing. It was
Well,
like, these
no,
are
I know what you mean.
rock and roll stories, man.
Totally. And you feel like you're like, I think like just that pressure, that's what I hope that we all get to release, releasing that pressure and
Yep.
know if we really are present. And like you said, we show up, God's going to do things and going to do things beyond what we could ask or imagine. So in this story, it's funny that this is the story that came to my mind, but I think maybe this is what I meant to tell. But I asked her if I could pray. And again, a lot of prayer in our context, it's an emptying prayer, or you may ask for an energy or even a divine presence. And I said, I'm going to pray for you, and I'm going to ask, if it's okay, I'm going to ask for the Spirit of Jesus to be I'm going to pray in the name and what I would say the authority of a spirit, and that is the Spirit of Jesus. She was very open to it. We prayed, and I asked her, what are you experiencing? What are you hearing? So I trusted that, maybe God could speak to her. And she is the one who said, I think this Spirit Jesus that you talk about is the Spirit of peace. And I said, yes, he is. This is the Spirit of peace. So this woman, this is not a, rah, let's, conversion story. This is an ongoing, long-term story. But this woman, when she introduces people to me to people, she calls me her pastor. When she refers to my house, she calls it a sanctuary. She calls it,
Awesome.
She basically calls our home the place. She says, if I, when I need spiritual strength, and she's the one who speaks of Jesus as the giver of peace. And I didn't even have to tell her that. She's never read those passages,
Yeah.
And God is birthing something in her life. I believe it. And I'm devoted to her forever. So that's, though there's countless stories like that, other stories where even, I think sometimes it's that tension that some of us feel. Maybe some of us are more, bold evangelists, and others of us are just trying to figure out what the heck are we supposed to say in the moment. And what I've often found as well is, times when I'm trying to be careful and not like over evangelize. It's those moments when the people in my life actually respond back to me and ask me, why didn't you tell me? Well, what does your Bible say about this?
Yeah.
And then we do the Bible, and I'm convicted thinking, man, I had to wait for them to ask me. And maybe that's not so bad, especially when I'm just embracing my own limitations and my own insecurities and my own personality. And I'm working out my own salvation in all of that, So on another, and on another level, these are the individual stories. And then when we look at systemic injustice, which often feels overwhelming, this is incredibly helpful because there's about 1,000,001 things that we could do, me individually and us as a community, to participate in the restorative work that God's doing in our neighborhood. And as we become better listeners, the Spirit actually leads us not only in what mission or cause to participate or champion in according to our passions and gifts and where God's leading us, but also this keen sense of wisdom on what to do, what is our place, and how do we champion the values of Jesus in this place.
Yeah, I love that. And, it's funny because my story is that I actually quit ministry before I planted my first church. And it happened accidentally. I was just leading a reading group in Starbucks. Yeah. And it was, I didn't want to be a pastor anymore. I was like, I'm done. Your people suck. And, I'm tired of trying to reach people, fighting through Christians. But what was interesting was prior to that, because I'd really started to experience kind of what you're talking about, where God's like, hey, I'm here. I feel often like Jacob, like where Jacob, he puts his head on that rock and he wakes up and he goes, surely God is in this place and I didn't know it. or like when Jesus, God is in the house already. I walked into this lady's house. We threw a barbecue, and this couple stopped by, and he was on drugs and she was drunk, and they got in this rip-roaring fight. First time we'd ever met these neighbors, and this is in Europe. And we're like, wow, we'll never see them again. And, went and knocked on their door, just kept praying for them, knocked on their door. And we walked into her house, and she had been a recluse for about 12 years. And I walked in, and the Spirit of God was so thick in that room, you could have cut it with a knife. Now, I was a well-mannered, pasty white evangelical reformed boy, and this completely bucked against my theology. And it shouldn't have, because it was so biblical. Like, it was literally like a Cornelius experience. But I remember being scandalized, like, hey, I bring this. I'm the missionary. I bring this. And no, God was like, hey, man, you've been playing in the whitewash. You don't really understand how big I am, and that I love these people. And I'm working. It's like when Jesus said, Father, I praise you. You've revealed these things to babes, and you are working and have been working till now. God is working. This is what I love about your message, Christiana, is God's working so much harder than us. We don't have to work that hard. Like, we really don't, and I love that that's something that you're bringing to the conversation and to the church at large. Tell me, what does church look like? Because you talked about embodying the values of Christ in your community. What does church look like for you?
For me, it is it's a group of people. We've all committed to live out our spirituality and our discipleship within the context of our shared neighborhoods. So we all have jobs. Most of us work maybe in close proximity, but a lot of times out of the neighborhood. I travel a little bit here and there, but our embedded life is in this neighborhood together. So we, when we joined the church, we all said, what would it look like if we loved Golden Hill together? So we gather once a week for worship and reflection, studying scripture, for a common meal. We come together also another time in the week for prayer, and often prayer for us looks either like a liturgy or sometimes a prayer walk, sometimes specific prayer for specific people, sometimes healing prayer and listening prayer. We kind of experiment with different forms of prayer. And on that night, we have another shared meal. So we have 2 shared meals a week. And then we are all in, so this is a part of our commitment. So big thing value for us is promise making and promise keeping. So we have ways that we actually hold each other to our commitments that are not, it's not commitment for commitment's sake. It's commitment because we have a sense of call together to be the church together. So we meet together in pairs or triads about every other week, mostly just sort of checking in on each other's heart and soul, and how are we doing in our own discipleship. And then we're all participating in some way, depending on capacity, life stage. We're a really mixed group as far as age range and life stage. So we are participating in some way, shape, in some form of service, volunteer. It really looks different. We don't prescribe what it looks like for us to be, quote unquote, doing ministry. So one of my community mates is a nurse, but an off the clock nurse. And she is a pastor of this neighborhood. On all her off hours, she basically meets with people to help process their health struggles and help them find resources. And in that, she's become a spiritual friend and a pastor to many. I love it. Yeah, I mean, I can kind of go down the line and you name different people. For me, more recently, my kids' school, which is our neighborhood school, has been just this unbelievable space of joining God. And I like systemic. I like getting involved at systemic levels, and so this actually the last few months has been really contending for some areas of justice and need and resourcing for our school at a district level. And I'll say, like, the amount of, I think, God's breakthrough or favor that we've seen happen that's impacting the kids of our neighborhood. And our neighborhood we're a Title I school. We have a lot of under-resourced families. And I, alongside mostly non-Christian parents who are also care about their kids, I'm getting together. And they know that I'm coming at this from a faith perspective, because we could all leave, we don't have to stay at this school, but we feel this sense that God is, has called us here and called us to love well here, and not just because of our kids, but because of all the kids. So that's just one example, I think. So that's church for me, and it even goes beyond that, because we're connected with other churches in the neighborhood as well as outside the neighborhood. We're we do have our gathering space and kind of our formality as far as how we are a congregating group, but how the church looks on a day-to-day, and it actually evolves and shifts as new people come, and we actually send people out, especially when they sense called to maybe even start another community or maybe join another mission endeavor somewhere else.
That's cool. Very cool.
We have a lot of people who will come and join us for a season who are really burnt out from some of the forms of churches that haven't necessarily been as satisfying. And so a lot of times we get to help people heal and reimagine what church could be for them without being deconstructive. Yeah,
no, that's good. That's good, because different churches have their strengths and but what I think every church needs, and what you're hitting on, is a passion of mine. That is every believer activated in their gifts, serving and in what makes them come alive and what they're passionate about. And I think that's the weakness. When you harness that, that's kind of it. I always tell people that Acts 2:42 is what it looks like when, people are activated in their gifts. It's that simple. And we try to run programs and and that's not going to do it. You're never going to have that until, like you said, that nurse, people are just activated and, just letting Christ just live through them. And I think that's the key. So, hey, this has been awesome. I have our special question for you, which is, because, you said your parents were missionaries. So normally we ask you how you came to faith. And of course, you weren't a Christian because your parents were missionaries. You were a holy baby.
Right, exactly.
And, came out of the womb.
Never wavered.
Yes, of course, all that. But here's our question. And this is tricky because normally, we're asking men this because men like these kind of questions. But if you...
Yeah, watch out, Peyton.
I know, I got to be careful, right? But I am an equal opportunity podcaster, so this could either be offensive or not offensive at all. So darned if I do and darned if I don't. But here's the deal: if you were to get into a physical fist fight with Jen Hatmaker, I just threw a name out there.
Oh gosh. This is, I can't believe you're asking this violent question.
Told you it's offensive no matter what.
You know what we would do? we would throw a few punches, and then we would do a really incredible high five, and we would say, "Hey, come on. What are we doing? Let's get to work. Let's go alter the world together." That's what we would do. That's
let's be peacemakers. Come on.
Let's make peace right here.
Yeah, because I also was going to have you fight.
Stuff done.
Yeah, I was going to have you fight Deb Hirsch too, and then I thought, no, it's a little too close to home. You're probably close to her, so. But yeah. So
I am a little younger and stronger, but I don't know. I think she'd outwit me, and she'd definitely slap me around a bit. Yeah, that's great. Well, and that's cool because that's what we're looking for. I told you there was a little bit of smack in that last question. That's the smack talk we're looking for. So that is really good. So ding, ding, ding. You're welcome. You're welcome. I could have had you fight Michael, but here's the thing about Frosty, right? I'd win. I definitely win in that game. Yeah, see, and I knew you were going to say that. Here's the thing is we know he's a lover, not a fighter, but he kind of seems like the gangster, like the like the bone crusher. If he hadn't come to faith, he'd be like the Godfather. for sure.
The Godfather, yeah, totally. You would literally see him in a dark alley and he'd be like the fixer, So we decided that, but I knew you'd say you could take him. But because he's your co-author, it's kind of not cool for me to ask that. But at least we all know podcasters, audience out there, we all know who would win, right? It would be Christiana.
We all know.
Okay, well, great. Hey, if guys, the book is To Alter Your World. And if you guys want to get in touch with Christiana, what's the best place they could track you down?
I would go to the Thresholds website, and that's kind of an easy space to get a hold of me. Of course, Facebook, Twitter, got an Instagram account, and then as far as the book, continuing with the book, Mike Frost has his blog, and in that space, there's a lot of ongoing content that I think has been a help and a blessing to people.
Awesome. Well, great. Again, To Alter Your World, you can pick that up anywhere books are sold. And Christiana, thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right. Guys, this has been Hardcore Church Planting. Our guest has been Christiana Rice. Arnold, sign us out.
Remember, if you are called to church planting, go hardcore or go home.
You've been listening to Hardcore Church Planting. Hardcore Church Planting has been brought to you by the Church Planter Podcast and the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the App Store for both Apple and Android devices. If you like this episode, leave us a positive review. If you didn't like this episode, we'll be happy to give you your money back.